Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Bad Batch Season 2 review. We are talking about Episode 3 in this video, The Solitary Clone. We're going to dive into all of the stuff that happened in this episode, spoiler filled. So if you haven't watched the episode yet, come back after you've seen it. But we're going to dive into all of that. Before we do so, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to our channel for continued Star Wars content. We are going to be following the Bad Batch through its 14 weeks of release. This is week 2, so there's still 12 more weeks to follow along with us for this show, as well as The Mandalorian Season 3 when that starts, and Jedi Survivor. So you're going to want to make sure you're subscribed to Star Wars Lads for all of that great content. Hit that like button below so you can get into the YouTube algorithm and interact with more Star Wars fans. It really does help us out a lot when you like and subscribe. Comment below and let us know what your favorite parts of this episode were and what your overall impressions of it was. This was a really, really good episode, and we can't wait to talk about it. So let's dive in to The Solitary Clone. This episode was, I think, not exactly what we were expecting. It was a full Crosshair episode, not any Bad Batch in it at all. I guess you could say that Crosshair is a member of the Bad Batch in spirit, but he is not currently a part of the Bad Batch squad. So I really dug that angle. Sanak, what were your overall thoughts on this episode 3?
Yeah, like you said, no bad bets, and I mean we got plenty. And we were talking about how the first episode of the premiere was like, let's get back up to speed with little tweaks and upgrades to the characters and their motivations and their behaviors. And then episode two, and kind of ends with like, okay, here's like a reminder that the end of the first season was quite dark and bleak. I think what really helped too is that it plays out sort of like a reverse Clone Wars episode. Usually those episodes started with the action and then they kind of went to the characterization. Here we started with like the characterizations here of Crosshair, his daily life, his contact with Rampart. Obviously the big thing is Cody is back, right, as we saw in the trailer, but this is the episode with him. So we're just kind of seeing like, oh, what's he thinking about? What's he doing? And like, oh, they're working together. Crosshair's been assigned to him to go into this planet Desix that is a separatist holdout. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that, because we played on so many of the beats and the actions that we saw in the Clone Wars episodes growing up. It was like, wow, I'm seeing poppers again. I'm seeing like the physicality of guys. I'm seeing a lot of the same things, but also a lot of like differences. Like a lot of these clones, without having any markings and all that, you can't track, right? So it's like when Cody's like screaming, "Oh, this guy died," and all that, I'm like, I don't know if I can really keep track of them. I don't know how you are, but like now I've lost that sense of personality. A lot of these clones are just outright just like they're like murdered in masses compared to before, where like they could cover each other's spots. They always had a Jedi. It was like you lose a couple people or they're injured. Here it was like you already lost half your squad at the beginning to injury or death, and then the rest of them were just dying to like just the chaos of the situation. So it was like, oh, it was very bleak, very dark. This planet Desix that we're on, the animation and the lighting, God, it is incredible. Like just the fine wispiness of the sand and how it just like covers the edges of everything and like hangs in the air in some scenes. God, it looks so good. Like we went from like 2008 cloners where like if someone was waking up in the medical bay, it was like the lighting was just so bad that like it washed out everything else. And now we're like seeing like the mood of the characters. Like it looks like how like someone who spent like $30 million on a film would do it if they brought those sensibilities to animation. Like Lucasfilm has gotten so good at this now. It's just it's 3D animation in the Western world especially owes so much to George Lucas and then the continuation of the team from there. And this is like an episode that I thought the first two look great. This one is like a different level. It fit the tone so well. If this is what we're gonna do here and there, I wouldn't mind it, especially because man, Crosshair is ruthless. I think I'm gonna say the biggest surprise spoiler at the end for you because that was not entirely shocking for me, but it is something that's building up to the episode. I just didn't expect it to happen quite at the end there.
You're referring to Cody going AWOL? I really hope that means that he actually did go AWOL and not is killed off screen. Cody was the big standout for me for sure. I'm continuing to see Crosshair, like you mentioned at the beginning. Episode 1 and 2 is kind of our recap and our reintroduction to the Bad Batch. This was our reintroduction to Crosshair, who is obviously going to still be one of the main antagonists and one of the central characters of this entire show. We get to see him continuing to grapple with his role in the galaxy, but also just trying to justify the way he is so loyal to this empire that is continuing to discard his brothers and continuing to get rid of it. Cody is one of the most dogmatic clones we see in the Clone Wars, and at this point, even he is going AWOL supposedly. I mean, that could also just be a thing that Rampart says to Crosshair to see his reaction. Maybe Cody didn't actually go AWOL. Maybe he's still there. We don't really know, but I would love to see Cody and Rex reunite. This episode just continues to remind me why the show is so great and why I get so excited for the show. And it's the continual build and transition from early days of the Empire to the Rebellion. We're already starting to see a lot of that form. I love the way that this show is now starting to pair the clones with the Separatists, but now make them start to slowly feel like they are on the wrong side. And we got to see that in deleted scenes with Padme and Bail Organa. We got to see that in Revenge of the Sith with Padme talking to Anakin. There are a lot of elements of those people who are so staunchly loyal to the Republic, who view the Republic ideals as kind of the high standard, who ultimately lose their faith in the system because the leaders aren't holding those standards. And the clones are pretty much as close to that as you can get. They are bred to believe in the ideals of the Republic. And that's kind of costing the Empire as they venture away from those ideals. It's maybe not even really their choice. We get to hear Cody bring up the reference to we're better than battle droids because we can make choices and they can't. Something, mentioned by Lama Su in episode 2. Cody saying it again reaffirms why the clones will ultimately be a part of the rebellion and ultimately their fate. And if somebody like Cody is disappearing, I can't wait to see what the rest of the season holds. At the end of this episode, Rampart and Crosshair's dialogue and Crosshair's trajectory for this season seems to be kind of in question. Sanak, give me a little bit of your thoughts on kind of the dynamic there between Crosshair and Rampart, and where do you think like this is going ultimately, with how the two of them are kind of like vying for power against each other. They're both testing each other in different ways. Rampart pushing buttons to see how far is Crosshair willing to go to test his loyalties. Is he still loyal? What's his whole purpose here, and why did he? Rampart directly says it. He's like, "Why did you sit on the remains of Topoka City for all those days, waiting for somebody to save you? Like, what made you want to come back?"
It's a tough one because this is an episode that is very self-contained, but we are trying to really pull from everything that happened in the Bad Batch arc of the Clone Wars and throughout the first season. And the ruthlessness that he kind of exhibited here is the same, if not maybe a little less at times, and some of the things that he was doing against his own brothers, right? And like trying to fire up the engine in season 1 and all that. So it's I wasn't shocked by him immediately kind of gravitating towards that instinct. I thought what was surprising is that there's a little bit of a nuance coming in that, like, there are people that the Bad Batch fit in with, like the people who went above and beyond, people who are like, they could see eye to eye with or high level. And even if they had issues with like Rex and stuff like that, they still came to like fully respect him, were fully on board with him. And Cody is in that same boat as well. When it comes to the mission, he's cool and calm. Like that shot of him shooting down the barrel, I mean, that's sick. Like it's. I think it's interesting that he, even after 32 rotations of Camino and healing up, yeah, like he lives for this war. He is bred for it, and he's saying at the end there, he's like, when Cody's like, you think we're still fighting the same fight, that like we're doing the right thing, like we were bred for. He's like, we're soldiers. That's all I do. That's all I know. So if it comes to like abilities and stuff like that, I think he's and like doing the things for the Empire that he has to do. I think he's fully on board somehow, in some way, even after being like thrown away like trash by Rampart. It's where kind of figuring out his place with the other clones. Like that was what was the question this episode, and the only person he could have connected with is now AWOL. So I think he thinks like, okay, if everyone's leaving, it's because they don't really believe in the same way I do. Like they're not as firm. It's a very subtle thing, right? But I did enjoy that. It feels like something that we see in live action with Andor. I was like, it's not something they're trying to outright say, but his grappling war is with his mind and his interactions. You can look at it in so many different ways, but at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, he's a man who's like psychotically obsessed with becoming this version of the soldier that he thinks he should be and wants to be.
Yeah, absolutely. He is the solitary clone in this episode. We we speculated who that was going to be. He's the one that's left all alone. He sits by himself. He's the one that consistently is being switched from group to group. He has nobody. Ultimately, he's the last of a dying breed of loyal soldiers that are starting to learn to think for themselves all these years through the war. I really like that, and I think the Andor connections are even more relevant with all these parallels to the Separatists. Like seeing Andor talk about touch on that first all the way back in the Rogue One novelization when we mentioned the Cassian's family were separatists to all the through line through Andor season one and the ideas of revolt and revolution and all that. And now we're starting to see the commanders like Cody, those staunch loyalists like Cody, are inspired by separatists to do the right thing. And we're starting to see those lines blurred. And I really like that. I think that's going to be something that's really affecting Crosshair as he continues to be lonelier and lonelier every single episode. So I think that's going to do it for our review here of Bad Batch episode 3 of season 2, The Solitary Clone. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, if you have not liked the video down below, please do so. It really helps us out with this channel, and then subscribe to the channel as well. That'll help us out even more. And you want to stay in tune with Star Wars Lads for all the continued content for the Bad Batch season 2, as well as the Mandalorian season 3 and Jedi Survivor. So if you are not subscribed to Star Wars Lads, you're really missing out on a lot of great content. We have a lot of stuff coming out for you here in the future. Make sure you're keeping an eye on the polls for all the different voting for the next bracket. It is going to be Star Wars books as chosen by all of you. If you haven't checked out Sanak's video, what would Revenge of the Sith look like as a Disney Plus miniseries? Check that video out. That just came out on Tuesday, and then make sure you tune back in on Friday for our prediction speculation for the Bad Batch season 2 episode 4. We will be talking about what we think might happen in next week's episode. And then next week, stay tuned for our first episode of Legends Book Club for 2023. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.